One of the things that the CCCU does is represent the interest of our schools to the federal government. My initial role was government relations work and kind of the external advocacy challenges facing Christian higher education, of which there are many, and they are very real. As I was in this role for a few years, got to know the schools, got to know the landscape a little better, would talk to boards about the advocacy challenges and kind of see some things going on. I also realized that there was another threat, arguably a greater threat to Christian higher education, which is not the external threats, but it's actually an internal threat in terms of mission drift. I started to passionate about how do we come alongside our schools and help them stand firm in their mission, as well as advocate for them externally. Because if I'm advocating externally for robust hiring protections and things like that, but schools are giving that up voluntarily, what's the point? So now I do government and strategic relations, and the strategic relations piece is that kind of internal looking, like how can we shore up our schools' understanding of legal defenses so they know what they can and should be doing, and then give them the courage and conviction to live those out.
I love that you're coming at it from like, how do we protect ourselves legally to really advance the mission that the Lord's led us to? And then it's what you're the internal workings that you're seeing. Are there other examples of the internal ways that you see organizations drifting?
So I think there's different forms of drift, biblical mission drift, which is a key issue. I would actually argue there's also educational drift away from like a holistic kind of faith forming aspect to a more technical vocational aspect, which can still be, faith forming. But I see that as well as going to a more commodification and consumer oriented approach to education, which I would actually categorize as drift as well. In terms of biblical mission drift, it usually originates from some sort of pressure. So that may be enrollment pressure, financial pressure. For example, a school having enrollment challenges, let's say that they're a pacifist denomination, and they decide that they're having some enrollment challenges, that they need to start doing the GI Yellow Ribbon program to attract more veterans because they come with federal dollars. Maybe you can do that. That might make sense. What I see is schools making decisions based on finances instead of on mission. If you're a pacifist denomination, does that really make sense? Maybe it does, but are you actually having those conversations, or are you just doing whatever you can to increase enrollment? Another example that I see, probably the most common example, is hiring. There are a lot of protections for religious institutions to hire people who are religious and who agree with their mission and agree to abide by not only beliefs, but also practices. And so your statement of faith should include the behavioral expectations that you expect. It's a covenant, and some schools are more diligent about that than others. And like, I always recommend that you have a statement of faith. Like, I always ask schools, what is your policy for faculty signing? What about staff signing? What about adjunct faculty? If you have a fully online program, what about your online faculty? Do you have different requirements for the different types of schools? And we've seen that where we had a school where an adjunct there was an adjunct who wouldn't have been able to agree with the requirements for a full-time faculty member and applied for a full-time position and was turned down because of that, yet had been an adjunct for 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
Well, then that person sued. So what are your hiring requirements? And then how often do you reaffirm that? Like, I would argue a best practice is you should have schools reaffirm that annually. And your board should do it as well annually. And I would also suggest that best practice is the president being involved in every faculty hiring decision, because the reality is that there's always a temptation. Let's say that you had someone leave kind of unexpectedly. You haven't found the position yet. This is a really important class that you need to offer it, and you have a very academically qualified but not mission aligned adjunct. Well, you're tempted to hire that position because you need that class taught. I mean, you need that filled, and this person's very academically qualified. And so it's tempting to say, well, it's just an adjunct position. It's just temporary. While they're not quite mission aligned, it'll be all right. It's just temporary. But then you get into that situation I described earlier where then the adjunct wants a little more involvement, or you just get into tricky issues like that. And so there's a temptation, drift tends to happen when you prioritize other good things over mission. You're rarely prioritizing bad things, like drift is
Mhm.
rarely intentional, hence the name drift. Like it's not usually by making bad decisions, it's by prioritizing good things instead of mission. And in the hiring context, that comes up pretty often. And so the president, I think, should be involved in every faculty hire and be the ultimate decision maker, judging mission alignment.
That's really good. It sounds like too, just universities should be really questioning if they have different standards for different levels of faculty versus all faculty, all staff need to be able to sign on the statement of faith and adhere to that.
And, you may have a valid reason for having different hiring requirements, but
Mhm.
have you thought through that rather than just this is the way it was always done? Or, like if you were, for example, a denominational school, you might have some denominational beliefs that you require of your faculty that maybe it's not something that you need to require of staff. Maybe you need more key salvific issues and behavioral expectations, but some of the specific denominational things may not make as much sense for staff. It may, but that's an institutional decision. But my point would be to think through it and make decisions based on mission, not just based on what's easy.
Right. Or that when you're feeling that enrollment pressure or hiring pressure,
Donor pressure, alumni pressure, whatever it is.
do you feel like the greater temptation to drift is internal versus external?
I do, yeah. Just because there are so many pressures with the demographic cliff and just enrollment changes, and there's a real pressure culturally that's just skeptical of higher education.
Mhm.
So they don't want to pay for it because they are unconvinced of the value of it. And so there's a temptation to make your programs as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, low friction, low burden as possible. Like, oh, just put it fully online so that more people can do it. Well,
Mhm.
are you able to actually accomplish your mission, what you say that you want to inculcate in students? Are you able to do that in a fully online format? Maybe,
Mhm.
but have you thought through that from a pedagogical perspective? Or are you just making an enrollment decision on this is going to subsidize our residential campus? And so we need those additional students, those additional dollars, and we just need to create more programs.